Hello, this is John Wharf with MCNC, and today we are looking at Chromebooks and the North Carolina online testing. Now, we're going to be discussing how to properly set up your Chromebooks for North Carolina online testing and how you can restrict those access. My contact information is up on the screen. If you need any help after today, please reach out. MCNC works with school districts all across North Carolina on a regular basis, and we're here to assist you with your needs. So, to start off with, I wanted to give you a link to the North Carolina online testing site. This link here, they will take you through and explain to you the Chromebook information as well as some other things. But in today's video, we're going to be looking at some additional things that I recommend to folks to do to sort of lock down the machines a little more during the online testing. Some main things to remember. Your Chromebooks will need to be managed by your school or the school district. Now that could be that your Chromebooks are enrolled in your Google domain to where you're managing those. As well, you will need to have a user that is restricted. And we're going to look at that here in just a second. All users log in with a single identity. All of your students will log in with a single username and password in order to take the online testing. That's not a problem. We can have, 30, 40, 60, however many students logged in with the same credentials at one time. We're going to want to restrict all the services for that user. The only thing they really need is the web. And we'll take a look at turning off those services based upon the users and everything. Allow only certain websites to be loaded. Now, the two main ones that we're going to worry about today is data.ncsu.edu and center.ncsu.edu. Now, you're going to have to remember that these are hosted at NC State. So if you're directly connected to NC-REN, that's not a problem. You're directly connected to NC-REN, and NC State is only just a couple of hops away from your site. NC State is also connected to NC-REN for your connectivity needs. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in, take a look at the management console. Let me move this window out of my way here. So here I've got brought up the NC testing site. Now, if you'll notice, we'll see that the Chromebooks, and it's talking about the Chromebooks. If I scroll back up, we'll see all the different pieces of the North Carolina online testing. Now, they do support Chromebooks for the 2013-2014 school year. Now, if we scroll back down, we'll go through. We're not necessarily concerned about all the others today. Our main concern is the Chromebook interface. There's nothing that has to be installed in your Chromebooks. Now, the main thing is everything's going to be done from the management console. The one thing on your Chromebooks that you are going to need to pay attention to is making sure that your screen resolution is set correctly. Now, you can read more about the screen resolution here. You're going to want to make sure that the screens are fully maximized. If they are not, then we're going to run into some issues. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look, and we'll bounce back and forth between this screen and our management console. Now, you'll see that I'm logged into my management console. I'm logged in as admin at k12gapps.mcnc.org. This is our environment for being able to show different types of things. Now, we'll see if I go to my device management. This is my Chromebook device management. I need to log in again. So if I go to my device management, then I have my mobile management and my Chrome management. I want to go to my Chrome management, and then you see that I can see my devices. If I click on there, you'll notice that all of my Chromebook devices are enrolled in our domain. Now, all of my Chromebooks are in our root level of the domain. That is completely up to you. You can move them to sub-organizations, or you can leave them at the root level. Completely up to you where you want to put your Chromebook devices. Now, if you do put them inside of a certain OU, then you can restrict a little further down to the device level. But if you're not going to, these are one-to-one devices, things along those lines, we're not going to want to restrict the user's logins and everything. We'll discuss that a little bit more once we get into the device and configuration. So if I go back, I want to go back to my dashboard. First thing we need to do is we need to set up a user. Now notice that I've got several users here, as well I've already got several organizational units over on the right hand side. Now if you don't have any organizational units, yours may be collapsed, so check your triangle over on the right hand side. Make sure that it's expanded out all the way. Now as well, if you have all of your users just dumped into your organization, they may not have users. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to create a sub-organizational unit to where I can do my Chromebook online testing. Now, if I go ahead and click on my upside down triangle over on the right hand side of my K12G apps, you'll see that I have the option to add a sub-organization. I want to click on that, and I want to add a sub-organization of online testing. Now notice that I did not put a space. In my structure, I don't like to necessarily put spaces. And the reason that is because when you start working with the command line tool to do things with your Google Apps console, it's easier if you don't have spaces in the OU structure and things along those lines. Now, I want this to be placed underneath my primary organizational unit. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and say create organization. Now, if you have Google Apps directory sync running inside of your LEA, you will need to exclude your online testing from there. So inside of your Google Apps directory sync, underneath the Google Apps tab, you'll want to go inside of there and create an exclusion, tell it that it's an OU, and type in that online testing OU to exclude it. If you have any issues or concerns, please let me know and I can help you with that. So, we don't have any users currently in our online testing organizational unit. I'd like to go ahead and create a testing user. I can tell it add more users, and I want to create a user. I'm going to name my user online testing. Now, on the North Carolina online testing site, they recommend to create a generic user such as NC Test. You can call it NC Test if you want to. You can call it online testing, whatever the case may be that you want to do. So for me, I'm going to call mine NC Test. Now, go ahead and set a password. Now, the reason that I say go ahead and set a password is because we want to set this password for our users. We don't want our users to get a temporary password and have to change it upon login or anything like that. So for here, I'm going to add my account of testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, notice that it is over 8 characters and everything along those lines. You do not want to require users to change their password upon next login. If you do so, then the first student that logs in, they're going to get their password prompt to change their password. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say create new user. Excuse me. So I have my user as nctest and their email address is nctest@k12gapps.mcnc.org. I can go ahead and say done, or if you want to create multiple online testing accounts, you can. Now, remember I said all users can log in with the same username and password. That's completely fine. Now, I'll go ahead and say done. Now, I like to go ahead and open up my user, make sure everything is set. So if I click on my profile, we're not changing the user's password, and we're not requiring a password at the next login. Now, after all of your students take the online test, I do recommend to go in there and change that password. Go ahead and make it to where it's something completely different after testing so that folks are not using that online testing account after the fact. Now, go ahead and undo your contact sharing for that account. We don't want it to show up inside of your global address book within your domain. So we'll go ahead and undo that. And we can go ahead and say save changes. Now, if we look, we see it says 6 Google Apps are enabled. Now, being that inside of that OU structure, these services are enabled by default. Now, we are going to go through and turn those services off because we don't necessarily need those. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. and we see 0 licenses are assigned or nothing along those lines. Perfect. Nothing that we need to necessarily worry about. Now, if we click back on our online testing up at the top, we can go back to that organizational unit. Now, I want to go back out to my Google Apps, and we'll see that we have our different services. Now, I want to go ahead and highlight all of these services. Excuse me. I'm going to click on my calendar services first. Now, you notice that mine says on for everyone. Well, I want to go ahead and make changes to that. I want to say on for some organizational units. Now, I like to go in one by one and change these. So I go into online testing. Well, I don't need the online testing to have access to the online calendar. There's nothing that they should have to do inside of there. So I can go ahead and hit apply. And notice that it says it's going to turn off Google Plus and helpouts. Perfectly fine. I don't need Google Plus for my online testing. So I've now turned that off for them. Now, next I want to go back to my Google Apps, and I want to turn off for my Google Drive. Now, we want to turn off Google Drive for the mere fact that some students may be creative and use Google Drive to share files within that organizational unit. So I want to go down to my online testing. I want to override and turn Google Drive off as well. Notice that it says it could take 24 hours to propagate. That's perfectly fine. We're good with that. Now we can go ahead and close out of that one. Now we need to go back to our Google Apps, and we want to do the same thing to Gmail. We don't need email for this organizational unit, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off my online testing email. Yes, we understand that it's going to delete any email that's currently in there, and we want to go ahead and turn it off. Now that's turned off for that organizational unit. Google Sites. Our students don't need access to Google Sites for online testing, so we want to go ahead and turn this off as well. Remember, all of these things could take up to 24 hours to propagate, so we want to make sure that you set this up ahead of time. As well as always, you want to test out the different types of activities that you're going to be doing. You want to simulate it before the students take the test. We don't need Google Chat as well, so we can go ahead and turn off Talk, Hangouts. Go ahead and turn that off for our students that are going to be doing the online testing. So we've turned off all our different services for our online testing organizational unit. So we've got that turned off. Now, next step that we need to do is we're going to go back to our device management. Inside of our device management, we've got our Chrome management. We're going to click on it. Now we're back to our Google Chrome management. Notice that it's on for everyone. That's great. We want to leave Chrome management turned on. We don't want to turn this service off for our students because this is what pushes out the policies that we need to go to our student. So next thing, I'm going to go to my device settings. Now, the reason I'm going to device settings is because I want to go ahead and take you through and explain to you what you could do if you were moving your Chromebooks around. Now, if your Chromebooks were designated for online testing only, you could go into the online testing organizational unit and restrict it to where only your NC test at, for me, mailbox.mcnc.org was allowed to log into those Chromebooks. If you're in a one-to-one situation or a cart situation or anything along those lines, I would not probably recommend doing this because there are times that it may lag getting the information to the Chromebook and things along those lines. So for here, we're not going to do this. All of our Chromebooks are in our root level of k12gapps.mcnc.org. That's perfectly fine. Now, we're going to go ahead and go back to our Chrome management, and we're going to go to our user settings. Now, everything that we're going to do is inside of our online testing with the user settings area. Now, for this, we're going to set up everything to go towards that NC Test user. Now, things that you got to remember is we don't want this user to be able to really do anything on the device. Now, your teachers are going to have classroom management to be able to walk around, make sure that the students are logged into the online testing account. Now, if they're not logged into that account, there's going to be some red flags that are going to automatically pop up. Now, we want to make sure that they are logged into this account, because otherwise, if they're not, they can access other websites and things along those lines. Classroom management comes into play there. So, allowed types of apps and extensions, we don't necessarily need any of these different ones, okay? Because everything is on the online site, so we don't need any of these things. Now, pre-installed apps and extensions, we can go there. We don't need any pre-installed apps or extensions either. Now, the other thing is allowed apps and extensions. We want to block all apps and extensions except the ones we allow. We're not concerned about those apps and extensions because we don't necessarily care about any of that. All this user is going to be allowed to do is go to the online testing site. So we can go ahead and shut out all of that. Our password manager, we don't want to allow the password manager because we don't want to save the passwords on the local device. I'm a big one for this. You can leave this to where they can show their password if you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and say never show password. Next thing, screen lock. Allow the user to configure or automatically lock on idle. Now, for the online testing, I would say never automatically lock the screen on idle. Your student may be reading a passage on the Chromebook, something along those lines. Now, we do want to encourage them, if they walk away from their Chromebook, they need to log out of the device. Incognito mode. We do not want to allow incognito mode because that could potentially allow them to bypass us. Always save the browser history. That's fine for this instance because all we're allowing them to do is go to the one site. Safe browsing. Allow the user to decide. We'll go ahead and say enable safe browsing. Allow user to proceed anyhow. That's fine. They're only going to be allowed to get access. Now, if you are using Zscaler or any type of proxy content filtering service, let's go ahead and say no filter on this. Now, the reason is because we're going to be using Google's filter. We don't necessarily have to push a packed file to the online testing account. The home button, allow the user to configure. We'll go ahead and show the home button. That's perfectly fine. The home page is a new tab. Well, for here, we want to say homepage is always the new tab page, or homepage is always a certain URL. You can set this to a certain URL, put in the online testing URL. We can go ahead and have that set up there. We can also, for the pages to load up on startup, pages to load on startup, you would put in there the North Carolina online testing page so that it would automatically start up for your users. Safe search, we'll always use safe search even though they're not going to be able to do Google searches. Screenshot. Disable the screenshot feature because the students don't necessarily need to be able to take a screenshot of their screens or anything along those lines. All the cookie settings, things along those lines, we can leave those as the default. Next thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and scroll on down. Pop-ups. We want to go ahead and allow pop-ups. That's perfectly fine. And allow pop-ups on these sites. I like to go ahead and put in data.ncsu.edu as well as center.ncsu.edu. That way they will automatically pop up if there are pop-ups on those sites. Then we get into the main feature that we need to make sure that we do for this online testing account. We want to block any URL that is not what we want them to be. So for that, we're going to put in a star. When we put in a star, it tells Google, hey, block this Chromebook user from accessing any website except the ones that we want them to access. Next thing is our URL blacklist exception. Here we want to put in center.ncsu.edu as well as data.ncsu.edu. Okay? We want to go ahead and put in these websites so that they will be bypassed by the blacklist. Syncing data with Google Drive. Disable Google Drive syncing. They're not going to have access, so we don't necessarily need anything with those either. Printing. Students shouldn't have to print anything during the online testing. We can go ahead and disable that printing feature. Bookmarks bar. Disable the bookmarks bar. Now, they should not need that. If they open up a new tab, it's going to bring up their stuff. If they click on the home button, it's going to take them to the online testing site. Now, same time, they don't need to be able to edit the bookmark bar either. Now, we just want to stop anything and everything that a student could potentially do with the Chromebook. So we go ahead and disable that as well. Next thing is if we scroll on down, we can go ahead and slide on down to our external and internal and microphones and everything along those lines. So here, we don't need video input. They don't need access to the camera during the online testing. Speakers and audio output, they will need possibly the audio output. So we'll go ahead and turn that feature on for them. Now we've gone through all of the settings and we can go ahead and say save. Now, once we say save, now if you take a Chromebook and log in as your online testing user, all you will be able to access is the data.ncsu.edu site and center.ncsu.edu website. Now that restricts your users. They're not allowed to go anywhere except where you want them to go. They can't add any themes that will be synchronized across multiple Chromebooks. They're not allowed to add any apps or extensions. They're not allowed to do anything except what you told them they're able to do on their Chromebook. So we've gone through, we've basically sort of given them a secure browser environment for their Chromebook. Now, I encourage you to highly go through, test this out, make sure that it goes the way that you want it to go, make sure that these users are restricted within your domain, that they're not allowed to access anything else. Again, you can always go out here to the Center for North Carolina Online Testing, center.ncsu.edu, and be able to access and find the different pieces that you need to as well. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me and let me know. We'll be more than happy to help you out if you have any concerns or issues within your environment. Thank you and look forward to working with you in the near future.